Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Cinefile, the podcast celebrating cinema one film at a time. Each week, my co-host Jake Beal and I break down a film, discussing anything from mise-en-scène to scenes you missed. Today, we talk about how a dream becomes reality in 1993's Rudy. This is our third of 4 weeks of our Football in the Fall series. Jake, honestly, I think we should call it Favreau in the Fall, because this is the second of three, two of the three movies in this series have had Jon Favreau in a supporting role, which is so weird. What are the odds?
Really, what are the odds? Because he's not exactly the most. When I think of Jon Favreau, I don't always think of yes, football. I think of The Replacements, and I think of Elf and Star Wars now. It's really a weird mix that I think of when I think of Jon Favreau.
Yeah, I think of Star Wars. I think of Happy Hogan in all the MCU films. So it's weird. I low-key did not like his haircut. Yeah. Like his haircut was just not it. But it was, I guess, appropriate for the time period. Right. This was my pick this week, and I'm really glad that I picked a movie that I liked. Because last time I picked a movie, I did not like it. So, right. Also, for those of you that watched last week's podcast, I just want to apologize for predicting that the Cowboys would get their behinds whooped. They won 40-0 against the Giants. So I will no longer make predictions on football scores on this podcast. Nevertheless, this is all about Notre Dame football and Rudy Ruettiger, who is one of the most inspirational stories in football. But Rudy is really stupid.
How do you mean? Do you mean he's academically stupid?
There's literally a scene in this movie where he confesses to somebody that he's not a Notre Dame student.
Okay, because he's drunk.
Yeah, well, yeah. How drunk do you have to be to, he literally is like, I'm so glad you let me do this. I'm not a Notre Dame student. And she goes, you're not a Notre Dame student? He goes, no. She goes, well, I can't let you do this. He's like, he says, I thought we had a deal. Come on. No.
He said, but Mr. Frodo.
Yeah, honestly, welcome to Lord of the Rings 0.5. This isn't the first. This isn't Fellowship. But this is Samwise Big Adventure.
He is still a halfling in this, that's for sure.
And I'll tell you, every time because I think I'd seen maybe parts of this movie, but I'd never seen it all the way through. Every time I saw Sean Astin, all I thought of was Samwise Gamgee. And I think I texted you that I kind of want to just watch Lord of the Rings. Yeah. As much as I love this movie, I kind of just want to watch Lord of the Rings instead, because that's one of his most well-known roles. But I think he does a spectacular job here, kind of going into some of the actors and some of the performances. I think him as Rudy, he has this kind of innocence. One, he has great hair. I know this is the second time I've mentioned hair today, but he legit has a really good head of hair. I kind of wish I had his head of hair. And this is the end of hair talk. But I thought that he had this great kind of innocence about him, and this kind of optimism in the face of adversity. And I thought that Sean Astin did a great job of kind of bringing that forward. He also is funny, and he's funny in this. It's obviously more of a serious role than, I ain't dropping no eaves, sir. But at the same time, I think he brings a comedic element, so it's not too negative, I guess.
He has this very, you said, innocence, and I think it's the right word. He's a very innocent character, and it's that naivety of being so a small town innocent kid who's experiencing I don't know. I don't want to say experiencing the real world, because like he spends 4 years working in the steel mill after he graduates college, so he's experienced the real world. But there's this like childlike awe because he's going to Notre Dame to live out his dream, right? He's grown up watching Notre Dame, loving Notre Dame, and he's always wanted to go there and play football. So now he is going and pursuing that dream. And I think there's something about pursuing pursuing childlike dreams that just screams of innocence. And I think that's conveyed in this movie. And I think sometimes that innocence is played for laughs, like as you point out, because he is a kid who academically really has no business being at the University of Notre Dame.
No, not at all.
But and athletically has no reason being at the University of Notre Dame. So the fact that he's there is just kind of laughable to begin with.
Well, it's also weird too because he mentions to the coach that he led the team in tackles, but you see no athletic skill.
Mm-hmm.
Like in this entire movie, there is the last play is like the only athletic skill you ever see from Rudy. So it's weird to me that he led the team in tackles, but then he went and like literally couldn't tackle a blade of grass.
Well, you can lead your team in tackles in high school in a small town. You can lead your team in tackles in that setting, but to then go to the University of Notre Dame where he is literally a boy playing amongst men in terms of stature and athletic ability, that's a whole different ballgame.
Right. So I thought his performance was excellent.
No, I agree.
Really good performance. I really like Ned Beatty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, anytime I see Ned Beatty, all I can think of is Superman the movie, because he plays the henchman of Lex Luthor in Superman the movie. And I'm trying to remember the name of the guy, but it's like, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Luthor. And he always like kind of talks like that. But I think he brings a really interesting element to this, of kind of the more pessimistic realist in the scenario, but he's also not necessarily discouraging, right? Like he's the first, because you have three different views on life, I think, through three of the characters. You've got Rudy, you've got his dad, and then you also got his brother. And his brother is just an ass, like through and through. And he really is not nice, and
not at all.
He kind of disparages Rudy all the time. Even when Rudy's like, hey, I'm playing for Notre Dame, like I'm on the football team, he goes basically like, I'll believe it when I see it. And then you've got the dad who is kind of like, why are you focusing on this? But also, I'm gonna be there. And he brought him the transcript, said like, look, I got all B's and an A. And hey, look, I got into Notre Dame. And so he's kind of encouraging that way. And then you've got this kind of infectious optimism that Rudy brings to the table. So I think it's a really interesting view. You've got three different characters that all kind of grew up. Well, I mean, they all lived together, right, for a significant amount of time. And then they all, each one of them has a different outlook on life.
Yeah. No, I thought Ned Beatty's performance was really good. It's probably one of the standouts on this rewatch for me, because I've seen this movie multiple times as a lifelong Notre Dame fan. If you could,
I was gonna say, you're kidding. You've seen Rudy
by the sweatshirt. Definitely saying the fight song word for word. You can ask Tanner. But no, he gives a very good performance in this, and I think it has an immense amount of subtlety to it, which I really, really appreciated, because I think rightfully so, but I think Sean Astin's can tend towards a little bigger. It's a little more expressive of a performance. So I kind of liked some of the balancing scenes, and I think it goes to show kind of that spectrum you were just talking about of, you've got his brother who's the staunch pessimist on one side, and then you've got Rudy who's the staunch optimist on the other side, and his dad's kind of in the middle, and so he's not going to have the big excited emotional reactions that Rudy's going to have, because he's a little bit jaded, or he's seasoned by life, if you will, to be a little more pessimistic than Rudy is. But I find, I don't know, I think just looking at it through like that lens of those three characters, I think says a lot about this story and like the messaging of the story. I think it's really interesting because the message you can take away from this movie, I think, is different from how you come into it, which I know, breaking news, everyone gets something different out of a movie. Like, oh my gosh, what a profound thought. But I think you kind of find yourself in kind of one of these categories, kind of walking into it, and I think the movie kind of pulls you one way or another. I think it kind of pulls you towards the center of that spectrum, because put it this way, you can come at this as a staunch optimist, as a Rudy, and I think you can almost leave a little disappointed that like, oh, like, okay, Rudy got in for one play or 3 plays, whatever it is. He got 1 tackle. I'm like, yes, that's cool and it's celebrated, blah blah blah, but like, he doesn't, he dreamed of playing his whole college career at Notre Dame and being this football star, and that's not what he achieved. But you can also come into this looking at it as like, oh, it's very childish of him to go and pursue this dream that's not going to be a reality, when kind of like his I don't want to say so much his brother, because his brothers can be very mean spirited about it, but how his dad is almost, he talks to him multiple times about, he's like, the job of the steel mill is like, you make good money, you can make a living there, so why are you going to go waste all this money trying to go to a college that you probably won't even get into, and is it really going to help you in the long run? And so I think you can look at that more of a pessimistic angle, coming into this being like, yeah, like, okay, yeah, it's all fun and good, but like, Rudy just kind of like, so what after that? Like, okay, you got to play in a football game. But I think for those people, there's still a message of, it's not all about what gets you ahead in life. Sometimes it's about, or I guess sometimes it's okay to do things that fulfill your dreams, even just to fulfill a dream, right? Every step doesn't always have to be about like, oh, setting yourself up for success in life, 10, 20, 30 years down the road, making sure you have a good job, making sure you have all this. Sometimes life isn't so much about what's kind of coming ahead, but enjoying the ride now. And if going and trying to fulfill that dream of playing college football at Notre Dame is that dream, like, you're not hurting anybody, so go for it.
And I think that's really apt. That's one of the things that really resonated with me. It, and I think that's why this movie is endearing. When you talk about inspirational football movies, this is in the conversation. And especially for the time period in which it came out, we were still in an era where you didn't job hop much, or not nearly as much as you do now. And you didn't have the freedom all the time to have a career in something that you truly loved. There was this disconnect between career and kind of things you enjoy. So there are plenty of people that, I mean, and granted, you could start in something and not really like it and end up liking it. But I think there's that interest in that optimism that comes from this movie because of that. Because Rudy, even though he had a good paying job, was like, you know what? I'm still going to go and do this.
Mm-hmm.
And you could like it or you could not, but I'm going to do it. And that's something that even in my personal life, I know many times that I've had I don't want to say detractors, but people who mean well try and have me do something that would make sense, or make sense to them. And so and I have not done that, and they've been frustrated, but it actually ended up turning out better for me. And the reason I mentioned that is because that's exactly what kind of Rudy did. And yes, you're absolutely right. It is a little anticlimactic, um, the movie, because he wasn't even supposed to be in the game, and then all these players savagely are like, "Look, I'm not playing. Put Rudy in. Like, I'm not playing. Put Rudy in." They kept like laying their jerseys on the coaches. I was like, these boys are savage. Um, but I think you're right. The message of this is to sometimes not necessarily enjoy the ride, but sometimes you got to just do something that you enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're not great at it, but you enjoy it. And
Yeah.
that's the point.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think in our culture is not common enough.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people expect you. I mean, look at the way school works, right? You get grades, you're either good or bad at something. And so that kind of seeps into life where you don't really want to do something you're bad at,
Yeah.
even if you enjoy it. And there's this and so there are these people that do that, even though they're bad at it, they do it because they enjoy it. And we always look at them with such optimism, like, wow, like look at those people, like they're willing to. I mean, it happens a lot of time in theater. Not everybody is going to be, Hugh Jackman, and so, but they do it because they enjoy it, and you kind of have like that appreciation, like, wow, like you suck, but it's really cool that you like doing it,
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting way of going about this story.
Yeah. You bring up the scene where they all laid their jerseys on Dan Devine's desk. I'm going to burst your bubble here a little bit because this is based on a true story. But that scene never happened in real life.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That
So
that would be incredibly ballsy.
yes. So reading up on this a little bit because like I said, I've seen this many times, but I hadn't like really like looked into like the history behind it and like like what was kind of embellished versus what really happened. So Dan Devine is the coach Rudy's senior year. He really was Rudy's coach his last year at Notre Dame, and he really respected Rudy and was going to he had Rudy dress and play in the game on his own accord. Like that was happening because he had that much respect for Rudy. And this movie kind of paints Devine as the villain of the story. And Dan Devine, when they were trying to get this movie made, agreed to be portrayed as the villain because he knew that would make the story better. He knew having a villain and having that like that dream Rudy had like within his grasp and then snatched away, like he knew fictional him being the villain in this movie would make it better. And so he agreed when they were pitching around this idea, he agreed that like if that's what it needs to get the movie made, I'll be the villain. I don't care about me that much. Which I think is really interesting. But he also said if any of the players had come in and laid their jerseys on his desk, he said something effective. Well, they wouldn't get him back because they'd be off the team.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, wow, it's really ballsy that they did this. I said I texted you and I said this Notre Dame team is low-key savage for demanding that Rudy play and like come in there. And so and you bring up an interesting point there. When we have true stories a lot of times they are embellished. And I kind of want to talk about that. That
Yeah.
might be one of the themes of this podcast, because would him being the villain have made it better? And the reason why I kind of push back on that is I think it could have been handled in a way where everybody comes out the winner in the end. Right? If you look at the Coach Divine character, he could come in and kind of be really hard on Rudy, and you could have that, you could create that tension. But as that story progresses, he could kind of come around on Rudy. But you could still have that moment where Rudy quits as he doesn't think that the coach respects him. Because it's kind of like an internal change.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you could still have all of these moments, but then at the end, Coach Divine said, you've even won me over.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to put you in. So I guess now, granted, I think they kind of took that element and gave it to the players themselves instead. But I don't think you necessarily, I think it still could have worked without him being, I mean, he can be the antagonist. I think he should have been the antagonist. I think that's correct. But without him kind of being negative even to the end and not wanting to put him.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it could have worked. I definitely, think there's potential there. I don't know this. This is just kind of my hunch. So obviously there's the craft of filmmaking, then there's the business of filmmaking. And I almost wonder if this, in a sell to the studios that were funding this, if they were like, if because I have to imagine they would have started as true to the original story as possible. Now, apparently, the screenwriter, what's his name? Angelo.
He married Mary. The screenwriter, like the Mary character.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he did. I looked it up.
What a guy.
Because I looked her up because I had never seen her before. And it turns out that Bro rizzed her up on this movie and married her right after. You know where she's from?
Where?
Goshen.
Really? What's her name?
You know. I'm not a nerd here.
Sorry, she didn't make it on
Greta Lind.
Huh.
Greta Lind
plays
Mary. She she was previously married to John Bailey and Angelo Pizzo. So I think it's so funny that the last thing she acted in, Rudy.
That's funny.
So apparently she married the screenwriter. But what were you saying?
Well, reading up on this, apparently he didn't want to write it because he hated Notre Dame. Which I will say,
respect.
Notre Dame is a very polarizing team.
Yes,
because even my dad and my grandparents on that side, we've all been Notre Dame fans, so I really had no choice. But my grandpa on my mom's side, he couldn't stand Notre Dame. He's a through and through IU Hoosiers fan. So Notre Dame can be a very polarizing fan base. So it didn't surprise me that there were people on the project that didn't care for the university.
That's really interesting because this movie is through and through a love letter to Notre Dame football.
Oh yeah, it is one of two movies that have been shot, at least at the time when it came out, and I'm pretty sure that's still true to this day. One of two movies that have been shot on campus at Notre Dame.
Yeah, and my aunt lives right off of campus.
Mm-hmm.
You literally, when you were working at WNDU, she was a quarter mile away.
Not even.
Not even, literally a stone's throw. And so every time I'm up there, we walk the campus. So it was very familiar to me. Even in 1993, I was like, okay, yeah, no, they're shooting on location, which is really cool. But what do you by chance know the other movie that was shot on location?
Newt Rockney, All American. So it's from the 40s. Newt Rockne played and then coached at Notre Dame. I think, yeah, he played there too.
Oh,
Anyways,
he's really famous.
oh yeah,
Like, yeah.
is like the godfather of Notre Dame football. Newt Rockne All American has that's the scene where we get the win-win for the Gipper.
Right.
Speech.
And the Gipper's Sonny. If this is the Godfather, the Gipper's Sonny. Because he dies.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know who played the Gipper in Newt Rockne All American?
Was it Ronald Reagan?
It was
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
Elite. Yeah, that's why they called him the Gipper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it was fairly early on in his career.
Yeah, he played Greg Gippington, the Gipper.
George Gipp.
Like I said.
Greg Gippington. Who the hell is that?
I don't know. You just know who the hell is that? That's the guy that tried to go by the Gipper nickname in high school, and then
they said nah.
Yeah, nah. They're like, nah. It's like, dang it, I almost had it. And this guy, George Gipp, decided to be like elite and play all the positions and then die.
Oh shoot. We
anyway.
got off the rails again. What were we talking about? Oh, about fact or fiction with this movie. I suspect that maybe at some point in the rewrites that they were like, no, we need more of a villain, because this movie is very much like in the very much like on genre, like on brand for like inspirational sports movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like to a T. And so having that villain who is in power and is able to, you know, be the obstacle for the player is usually, you know, it's a very kind of antagonistic coach or a rival team, something of that nature. So to your point, yes, I think the story as you described it could have worked. I think it could have worked well, but I almost wonder if they're like, we need to be a little more on brand here, or like some studio exec that was stingy with the purse strings is like, I'm just not getting enough like antagonist here out of design. So
right. And like I said, I mean, that really brings up the question of when you make a biopic, how willing are you to fudge the numbers, if you will? How willing are you to kind of maybe creatively weave a narrative? Because when you're creating a story, the narrative is very important.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be interesting all the way through, right? If you want to have a successful story, you need to capture the audience quickly and then have them captured for the rest of the film. That's why a lot of thrillers do really well, is because you get that visceral kind of feeling. You get that reaction kind of immediately, and so you're kind of drawn in. And the more you kind of feed that to the audience, the more they're kind of willing to go the distance with you, especially if it's like a 2.5 hour movie. And a lot of times, true stories have significant gaps in time from events that matter to the next event that matters. And so it's really, really hard to craft a narrative. I've seen some narratives where it's like the person is recounting life events, and so they're able to go from moment to moment to moment. Mm-hmm. But in this case, we don't have kind of an overarching narrator, right? We don't have a narrator kind of telling like, oh, well, this is my story. So we have to combine things. We have to make things like last longer, so we can have a proper arc. And so I think that the thing that I kind of wanted to talk to you about when it comes to storytelling is how willing are we to sacrifice the narrative? You know, what are the, I guess, for lack of a better term, what are the ethics of trying to tell somebody's story and how far can you push that from what actually happened before it's fiction?
Yeah. I think it's a great ethical question, and I think that's something every filmmaker has to answer for themselves. Um, I definitely think like subject, your subject matters. Um, a story about a nobody, or I shouldn't say nobody. It's an insult to Rudy. I apologize. A story about an underdog getting to play 3 plays at the University of Notre Dame and getting carried off the field. Fudging some things there doesn't change a lot in the grand scheme of things, you know.
Right.
Whereas something as like, you know, you start fudging things when it comes to more sensitive subjects, say like, oh, it's like a movie about the Holocaust, or different like tragedies, you know, natural human uh acts of genocide, what have you, the list goes on and on. But like when you get into that like more serious and heavy stuff, I feel like then the burden on the filmmakers is greater, because there are a lot of people that are going to watch a movie, and yeah, it could be based on a true event, but they're going to remember the movie as the true event, right? You're going to have people that have watched Rudy and never went and looked up his real story, and like deciphered, like we are, kind of where the lines kind of blurred between fact and fiction. And for Rudy's story, like I said, I don't think it matters that much. It's not as important in the grand scheme of things. But you start blurring the lines and bending the truth when it comes to major historical events, major tragedies, especially. I think you got to be a lot more careful. But I think, you know, filmmakers are always one. Your job is always to tell the best story possible, and so if it's not gonna, you know, I would say greatly offend most people, you're probably okay with it. But if it's an egregious or a gross overstep, definitely I think then you need to evaluate that more, whether it's okay to fudge the story. And I also think at the same time, audiences going to a movie want to be entertained rather than they want to be informed. So
right, this would be a documentary if you wanted to be informed.
Yeah. So I think, you know, there's even just a different expectation from the audience. And yes, the audience needs to learn that, like, this is a movie, this is a work of fiction. Like, even if it's based on a true story, there are things that are going to be fudged. So I think audience goers need to be more intelligent when it comes to understanding what they're seeing and not taking a Hollywood script as the gospel truth all the time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Especially when we talk about Rudy, I think the answer lies in the spirit. What is the message that they're trying to convey? What is appealing about Rudy's story? Well, the appealing thing about Rudy's story is his tenacity, right? His willingness to kind of fight in the trenches, to build up, to get to where he wants to go. That kind of spirit of determination. And I think that comes through in spades in this movie. But it's always a little frustrating for me as somebody. Well, I also really like documentaries, and maybe that's why, to see kind of some lines blurred. And so it's, you know, and I ask what the answer is. There is no right answer, right? That's kind of the whole point with ethics. Each person has a different opinion on what is ethical or not, but the question is thought provoking, right? It's okay. We're watching this movie. how, like for instance, we could say that Rudy didn't we could say Rudy lived in Indianapolis, right? That wouldn't be true. Would that affect the story? And so, I mean, obviously it spirals from there. But I just thought, I always think it's interesting with these kind of biopics on what they choose to include, what they choose to leave out. They really did not have a leading lady in this, which a lot of traditional, you'd have like a leading male, you have leading female. And so they did not include that. And I actually, it's kind of noticeable.
Mhm.
And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but like the Mary character, like I mentioned, you think, oh, is there going to be like a romance that's kind of sparked there? And then nothing happens with it. And you as an audience member are kind of trained to be like, okay, there's going to be a romance there. So when it doesn't happen, it's kind of jarring. But I think it doesn't really matter for the story. So when we watch a movie like this, we really have to decide what are the filmmakers trying to convey. Um, and that's what our interpretation should be. And like I said, there's no right interpretation, but if we're looking at it saying, okay, we're not watching this to see how a football practice is actually run, we're watching it to see the determination and the willingness to fight to get what you want, and to fulfill a dream and live out a dream. That's what the filmmakers are trying to get through to the audience. The other thing I kind of wanted to mention about this movie is the look of the movie.
Mhm.
And it's something that it's like really, I can't describe it other than it's very like 90s,
Yeah.
like late 80s, 90s. And what I mean by, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's got this, I don't know, warmness
Mhm.
to it. I don't know if it's because it's shot in fall, but the other thing, and I know I've mentioned this film before, and we're eventually going to talk about it. It's called October Sky. It's with Jake Gyllenhaal, and that was made in 1999. But I'm also reminded of something like Robin Williams.
Good Will Hunting.
That no, yes, but no. Um,
Um.
Dead Poet Society.
Yes.
And
Okay.
I don't know if it has to do with the fact that Notre Dame is like more of a traditional campus and that like it's
Mhm.
older.
Yeah.
But there is this just warmth that I kind of
Yeah.
get from the cinematography or the color grading or something about it. And I think that really is of the time period in which these films are made,
Mhm.
but also does something as like makes it like a feel good story. And
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on what it is specifically, but there's just something about the way this movie is shot. The colors, maybe it's because some of it takes place in fall. Um, it's just like there's this like kind of warmth to it in a way that really highlights and emphasizes, at least in my eyes, the feel good elements of the story.
Yeah. I definitely listen. One, I think yes, you're correct. It is on brand with kind of other films in kind of, or I should say other films that are contemporaries with this. They seem to kind of all feel similar with how they look. I also say, like you brought it up earlier, this movie is really kind of like a love letter to Notre Dame, and I think it's shot in a way that conveys Rudy's love of Notre Dame. The colors almost seem a little richer when we get to Notre Dame. You know, the golden helmets and the golden dome shines brighter, and everything's very picturesque. And Notre Dame is a very picturesque campus.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous campus.
I used to, you know, when I worked at the WNDU, we were literally on campus, so I was around it all the time. And Notre Dame is a very distinct college campus that it has. I don't know. It's just it's always had this special feel that I've never found anywhere else. Like Ball State has a very distinct feel. It doesn't feel the
Is
same
there?
as Notre Dame. Um, you know, why can't I think of any other college I've been to? Okay.
The only two colleges in existence are Notre Dame and Ball State.
State. Okay, I've been Western Michigan is in Kalamazoo. I've been there a number of times. That is closer to a feel of Ball State, but is still different than Ball State, but also very different than Notre Dame too. So it's like Notre Dame it's for a school in South Bend, Indiana, it has this very like ode to like Harvard or Yale kind of feel to it, which is very like, that's just kind of the identity of Notre Dame, is like they're the non-Ivy League school.
That's very accurate. I mean, even IU in some ways, has Bloomington is very picturesque.
Yes,
especially in the fall, especially in the spring. So I can kind of see that there. I also think, and this is something that I truly believe is true of film. It is shot on film.
Yes.
It is not shot digitally. And I think there is a difference. Like, I genuinely believe there is a difference when you're watching and you know something is shot on film and something is not. And something is shot digitally. There is something about it. Again, I couldn't tell you what exactly that is, but it just it adds a layer to the story.
Yeah.
And so it is clear that this is shot on film, and I think that is for this movie's benefit.
Yeah. I think shooting on digital versus on film, on digital you have to work harder to get that same kind of nostalgic, romantic feel that I think you're talking about. This very kind of like, just like appealing image, a warm kind of inviting image. And I think there's an inherent quality to film that isn't on digital. You know, digital almost seems to feel more cold and mechanic. It feels too perfect almost. So there's
like a beauty in the imperfection. Like
this
last Indiana Jones movie, I think would be a scooch better if it was shot on film. Like, I legitimately think like exact same movie, exact same visual effects, everything else. But if it was shot on film, I think it would have been better.
Yeah. That's just how it is sometimes. Yeah. But you bring up the look of this movie, and I've always thought that this movie, Rudy, reminds me of another famous sports movie that takes place in Indiana, Hoosiers. I've always thought that there's just something like
Gene Hackman.
Yes.
Goat.
The goat.
Gene Hackman in the fall instead of football.
If Gene Hackman was in this would be an incredible movie.
This would be an incredible.
It already is a good movie, but it would be even better. But no, I've always felt like there was just something that I was like, these seem similar, and not just because they both take place in Indiana. And then looking up like the people behind the camera on this movie, it made so much sense, because Angelo Pizzo, the guy who wrote the screenplay, wrote Hoosiers. The director, where is he? David Anspaugh.
Yeah.
Directed Hoosiers.
David Attenborough. Yeah.
No, not David Attenborough. Jerry Goldsmith did the score for this movie and Hoosiers. And
the score's really good too.
Oh yeah.
It's a sleeper. Like, it's so inspirational, and that really doesn't surprise me. A lot of times directors have certain composers they want to work with.
So and then even the director of photography on this movie, Oliver Wood, was the second unit director of photography on Hoosiers. And so it's just like, I don't know, like I looked all that up and it just like dawned on me. I was like, of course it looks the same. Of course it feels the same, because it's the same people making it.
Well, and like Hoosiers, they shot at Hinkle.
Yeah.
And that's obviously on Butler's campus.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a lot of similarities here. And I think there are even some similarities in the messaging of the two films. So it's very appropriate. that the same director, the same kind of creative team does both of these films. Only they had if Gene Hackman played Rudy, this movie would have
If Hackman played Rudy, he would have
in 1993.
He would have broken
1993 Gene Hackman. No, that's a movie. That's a movie. Yeah, Rudy 2 that's the name of the sequel.
Rudy Toot 2 Electric Boogaloo.
It's Rudy 2 is all about Rudy being old and trying to sneak back in and sleep in the office where he slept.
Yeah.
Which that's wild. Bro literally slept in that guy's office. He just clicked the lock and snuck in there. And respect to that guy for giving him a key.
Yeah.
That was really cool. Like, again, all the like little character moments like that, I think really elevate the like just how inspirational this movie is. But now is the time where we go into our rosebud and thorn. Jake, as always, I'm passing it off to you first. What are your rosebud and thorn for Rudy?
So I have a number of roses. John Astin, I'm going to give a rose. I'm going to give the screenplay a rose. I'm going to give the score a rose. The groundskeeper you're talking about, Fortune is his character name, which is so weird. There's a reason I never knew his name until this. But he's played by Charles S. Dutton. I really like him. So I'm going to give a rose to him, and I'm going to give a rose to Ned Beatty, because like I said earlier, Ned Beatty was kind of one of the standout performances on this rewatch for me. All three of the actors named, just they do so well. They understand their characters so well, I think. And I think, Sean Astin gives us this wonderful central figure of Rudy to really root for. But then Ned Beatty playing his dad and Charles Dutton playing the groundskeeper guy both have similar yet different impacts on that character and play off that beautifully. So I really liked all that there. It's a wonderfully crafted story. Yes, it fudges some things here and there, but I really like the screenplay. I like it better than I remember it on this rewatch. And then the score is just so... It's a mood. It's so in tune with the emotional beats of the movie that I was like, this is really good. So those are going to be my roses. And my bud is going to be the same bud I had last week, is that it's right on that edge of like too nostalgic, too cheesy, too sappy. And when you're in the mood for that, this is an incredible movie. But when you're not, this is a far inferior movie, I think.
Well, but it's a different kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
Like if we're putting this up against The Replacements, I mean that those are two very different kinds of cheesy. But I think you're absolutely right.
Like I feel like if this movie feels too cheesy, or can feel too cheesy, in the fact of like, okay, yeah, but that's not real how real life works, or that's the exception, not the rule of real life. Whereas The Replacements felt cheesy because it's like, this is very 90s or early 2000s.
Yeah, okay, I understand that.
So, but I think both of them like understand the assignment almost a little too well and like go right up to the edge of like, all right, this is what this movie's going to be about wholeheartedly. And if you don't like it, sucks. And honestly, if you don't like it, sucks, because this is a good movie.
I think for me, I'm assuming you don't have a thorn.
I have no thorns.
I think for me, my roses are going to go out to the score, the cinematography, and the choice to shoot it on film, and Sean Astin. I mean, obviously, we all know him as Samwise Gamgee, the absolute unit of the Fellowship. But it's really cool to see him in a starring role, in a bit of a different kind of role. Obviously, this is before he shot Lord of the Rings, but I think he really excels here. I think he does a good job. I think you're absolutely right. The score is spectacular. It really highlights the emotional beats of the film, and it's just really inspirational. It's just got that um, just rousing kind of. Uh, it's gentle but inspirational, and I really like that. And obviously, I already talked about the cinematography, how I like that it's shot on film, and that it's whether that's the color grading or what it is, that just it's like idealized life in a way, which is really cool. I'm gonna say that I kind of agree with you on your bud. I'd say like the script, the screenplay is kind of a bud for me. It's not that it's terrible. It's good, but and maybe this is just how Rudy's like low-key a little annoying. And I think that's probably how he was.
Yeah.
But it just kind of I don't know. It left something to be desired, in my opinion. And there are no I have no thoughts. Yeah. Now I want to know who you think I am.
Guy we kind of mentioned at the beginning, but really haven't circled back around. Mr. Jon Favreau plays character by the illustrious name of D-Bob. And
that bro has zero riz. Bro has zero riz.
And you got riz?
Hey, they call me the Rizzler.
Oh, nobody calls you the Rizzler.
Daniel Crockett calls me the Rizzler. He's never gonna watch us, but he calls me the Rizzler. That is true.
Is he serious about it? Or is it ironic?
I don't care. He also called me a meme lord. So
I will say D-Bob is especially bad with women. You're not you're not quite that bad. But you would try to like get someone to like someone that was indebted to you be your wingman though. I 100% think you would pull that. He doesn't deny it.
No, because it's true. But I in my defense, I can actually talk to women. And yes, that's not the issue. The issue is I have really high standards and I'm in my single era. So I have to focus on the fact that I'm in my single era.
Oh,
But yes, I probably would use somebody for help a brother out. You know what I mean?
I will also say that it's not just because of that. The fact that he's a TA, you TA'd in college, while you're doing your grad degree. So
that is true.
Didn't you TA like unofficially before? Or
yeah. But also I basically taught ethics, and so it's interesting that I bring ethics up in this because I literally did.
And he also is a very, I don't want to say, I guess you could say it's a dry sense of humor. It's a very I don't know how to describe his sense of humor. Like
where are you going with this?
He's funny, but like he's funny, but it's like roastable. Like it's a lot of roasts or like a lot of like kind of like pointed jokes.
Okay.
And it reminded me somewhat of your humor.
All right.
Yours is not as dry as his. Yours you inject quite a few more puns.
Okay, good. I was like, because he kind of came off as like an ass, a little bit in his humor style. But I cannot believe that he walked out, or he got a limousine, had like champagne and a cigar, and was walking in. Like, what?
You've clearly never been to a Notre Dame tailgate, then.
No, I have not. I have been to a Ball State tailgate.
Totally different animal.
I was to say I saw no Jello shots in this movie.
No.
No. Yeah. I obviously think that you're Rudy, but the reason I think you're Rudy, is also because in his bedroom he has a bunch of Chicago Bears memorabilia, and Jake is a Bears fan.
Sadly, unfortunately,
I was to say they just lost again.
I continue to suffer.
Yeah, Jake is a Bears fan, but also I know you love Notre Dame. I know you love Notre Dame football, and so that just really, and you played football in high school. So that really just stuck out to me. Also, you lived in La Follette. Or no, you didn't live in
No, I didn't live in La Follette.
But you know La Follette, and Rudy definitely lived in La Follette. like you know what I'm talking about too. Like it's like the same furniture. Like it's like they shot on location in Muncie.
Like because that was how it was back then, and La Follette just never changed. La Follette never updated.
I lived there in 2016, and it was the same furniture.
Yeah.
And then I got the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't exist. It's been torn down. Yes, sir. We both did this. So I think you just reminded, and it doesn't surprise you. I'm surprised that I'm the one that suggested this movie, and not you.
Yeah.
Because it's like a Notre Dame love letter, and you love Notre Dame. But yeah, final thoughts. What are your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I liked this movie more than I remember, and it's not that I didn't like this movie. It's just it had been a while since I've seen it. It's not one I like revisit all that often, which may come as surprising, considering I'm the guy here in a Notre Dame sweatshirt.
I was looking for. I don't think I have any Notre Dame merch.
Yeah. But it's not one I come back to often, so it was a pleasant rewatch this time. It has a lot more to it than I remembered. The football scenes are great. When he goes to practice at Notre Dame, like whoever that guy is that plays Ara Parseghian, like I never met Ara Parseghian, rest in peace to the king. He won only two. Yeah, he won 2 national titles at Notre Dame. Legendary coach. But anyways, that's how I imagine Ara Parseghian was, and like every old football coach. There's just something that like made me miss playing football when watching this movie. And it also, like, yes, it is a love letter to Notre Dame, so if you don't like Notre Dame, you probably won't like this movie. But for those of us who do love Notre Dame, our mother, as some would say, this is a really good movie. And it made me sad. This combined with I also had seen like a bunch of people from back home going to like Notre Dame tailgates this past weekend. And seeing that and then watching this movie was like, wow, I don't think I'm going to make it to a Notre Dame game this year. And I'm kind of sad. So go Irish.
I've never been to a Notre Dame game.
Go Irish and beat the Buckeyes. They play Ohio State this week. Beat the Buckeyes.
Do they really?
Yeah.
Crap, it's going to be a great game.
Top 10 matchup in South Bend. 7:30.
Yeah, game day.
Yeah,
game day is going to be there. Pat McAfee, elite legend. Human. Yeah, absolute legend is going to be there. My final thoughts. This is a great movie. It's really inspirational. It's fun. It's a fun watch. It's one of those feel good sports movies. I think it's a movie that you can definitely pull some truths out of. Meaning like there are applications for your life. So I really, really enjoyed it. Love the score. Sean Astin's great in it. I really wish that he would have played more than 3 snaps, because that was a hell of a movie for just 3 snaps. But like we talked about, that wasn't the point. But there are definitely some interesting ethical questions of truth versus fiction. How much is too much? And how willing are you to kind of fudge that line, blur that line, in order to service a story? But the real question is for you folks. What did you think? Had you seen Rudy? Are you a fan of Notre Dame? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. We love hearing from you. If you like this video, hit that like button and ring that bell with the subscribe button to get all notifications on upcoming content. Next week, I believe we're doing Remember the Titans. Make sure to follow us on social media. Follow myself, Jake, and the Cinefile. You see all the links right there on the screen. For Jake Biller, I'm Ben Sparrow. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you back here next week. And cut.